My beloved, listen closely, for this is not just another message. This is a divine invitation. There is a place where fear loses its power, where battles that once terrified you begin to crumble like dust under your feet. There is a life where you don't walk alone, where every step becomes guided, every breath becomes strengthened, and every moment becomes wrapped in a presence far greater than your own. There is a sacred power that flows when you make the choice to put God first. It is not just a suggestion, my beloved. It is the pathway to a life that is unshakable, a life that does not crumble when the storms of this world rise against you. When God comes before everything else, the ordinary decisions of life become infused with divine wisdom. Each choice you make carries His guidance. Each step you take is aligned with His perfect purpose, and each moment becomes a channel for His glory to move through you. You may not always see the immediate result, but there is a quiet, unstoppable force at work when you choose Him first. It is a force that turns confusion into clarity, weakness into strength, and uncertainty into peace. When you place God at the center of your plans, you invite His vision into every corner of your life. The things that once seemed overwhelming, the relationships that feel fragile, the work that feels impossible, the dreams that feel out of reach, begin to bend toward the impossible made possible. There is an order, a rhythm, a supernatural flow that only appears when God takes the lead, and your willingness to yield becomes the key that unlocks it. Some of you may have tried to live without this surrender, attempting to navigate life by your own understanding, by your own reasoning, and by your own timing. You may have felt the weight of decisions pressing upon your heart, the heaviness of choices that seemed too great to make, the frustration of wondering if you were doing the right thing. But when you put God first, that weight lifts, the path becomes illuminated, the confusion dissipates. You begin to see doors that were hidden, opportunities that were disguised as obstacles, and solutions that seemed impossible suddenly unfold before your eyes. There is a peace that accompanies this surrender, a peace that is not dependent on circumstances, a peace that flows like a river from the very presence of God within you. And it is not only about the big decisions, my friend. Even the smallest choices, the quiet moments, the simple acts of obedience gain eternal significance when God is first. Your words, your actions, your thoughts, your priorities, all are transformed. You are no longer acting out of fear, ambition, or selfish desire. You are acting from a place of divine partnership, a place where the heart is aligned with the Creator, and your steps follow the direction of His hand. This is the secret to living a victorious life, the hidden strength that turns ordinary people into conduits of extraordinary power. The moment you choose Him first, you enter into a reality where life's challenges are no longer overwhelming, where the enemy's schemes cannot succeed, and where the promises of God are no longer distant hopes but living realities in your daily experience. It is a choice, a deliberate act of faith, a declaration that your life belongs to Him above all else. And when you live from this place, every decision carries divine favor. Every action becomes an instrument of purpose, and every step is guided by a wisdom that surpasses human understanding. It is not always easy, but it is always worth it, because putting God first transforms ordinary life into something extraordinary, ordinary moments into miracles, and ordinary choices into a testimony of His power and faithfulness. There is a peace that comes when you learn to trust the presence of God in every step you take. It is not a peace that depends on circumstances, nor does it rely on what others say or do. It is a peace that rises from the knowledge that the one who holds the universe also holds you, and that nothing can touch you without his permission. To trust God's presence is to walk through life with confidence, not arrogance, but a quiet assurance that whatever comes, you are never alone. The storms may rage, the winds may blow, the enemy may try to intimidate, but when you trust that God is walking beside you, fear loses its grip. It is in the ordinary moments, in the mundane details of life, that trust begins to grow. When you wake up in the morning and commit your day into his hands, when you surrender your thoughts, your plans, and your worries, you are inviting his protection into every corner of your life. You are saying, Lord, I cannot see the way, but I know you see the end from the beginning. I cannot control what happens, but I trust you to guide me. And when you do this, the invisible hand of God begins to move. Doors open that no one can close. Paths become clear that once seemed blocked. People appear who can encourage, bless, and support you at exactly the right moment. It is a supernatural guidance, a wisdom that surpasses human reasoning, a direction that cannot be explained by chance or coincidence. There are times when the road seems dark, when the decisions seem impossible, when the pressures of life weigh heavily upon your shoulders. Yet even in those moments, God's presence is with you. It is like a shield surrounding your heart, protecting you from despair, fear, and doubt. And it is also a compass, pointing your steps in the right direction, turning your mistakes into lessons, your challenges into opportunities, and your setbacks into setups for breakthroughs. Some of you have tried to walk through life relying only on your own strength, your own knowledge, your own understanding, and you have felt the weight of disappointment, confusion, and exhaustion. But when you choose to trust God's presence, you release the burden of carrying everything alone. You begin to see that guidance is not always about avoiding obstacles, but about walking faithfully even when the way is unclear, knowing that he will not leave you, that he will not abandon you, that he will lead you according to his perfect plan. Trust transforms your perspective. It changes the way you see danger, turning what once seemed threatening into an opportunity for his power to be revealed. It changes the way you see relationships, work, and responsibilities, making every moment a chance to depend on him. And it changes the way you see yourself as someone who is never forsaken, never overlooked, never without protection, because the presence of God is always with you. This trust is not passive. It is active, bold, courageous, and persistent. It calls you to walk forward even when the path is uncertain, to take steps of faith even when fear tries to stop you, and to lean on a power far greater than your own. When you trust him fully, the guidance becomes unmistakable, the protection becomes undeniable, and the peace that surpasses all understanding begins to rule your heart. There is a supernatural authority that comes when you allow God to lead your life, a force that makes the schemes of the enemy powerless and the obstacles that once seemed insurmountable fall apart. You see, the enemy is clever, persistent, and relentless, but he cannot contend with the presence of God walking before you. Every trial, every attack, every difficulty carries less weight when God is leading, because his power turns what once seemed threatening into a testimony of victory. Some of you have felt overwhelmed by challenges, by people who oppose you, by circumstances that seem impossible, and you have wondered how you could ever overcome. Yet the moment you surrender the leadership of your life to God, everything changes. It is not your strength that defeats the enemy. It is his. It is not your wisdom that navigates the path. It is His guidance. When God leads, the opposition begins to scatter, and the burdens that pressed heavily upon your heart start to lift. There is a freedom in knowing that you do not have to fight with clenched fists or strained muscles, because the one who goes before you is stronger than any force arrayed against you. You may still see the challenges, the barriers, the opposition, but your perspective changes. What looked impossible before now becomes manageable, and what once intimidated you now trembles in His presence. You may have tried to face difficulties on your own, relying on your own reasoning, your own planning, your own effort, and felt exhausted, defeated, or trapped. But when God leads, the power of the enemy is broken, the strongholds crumble, and the walls that seemed immovable dissolve. It is not always immediate, and sometimes it requires patience, faith, and perseverance. But the direction of God is never wrong, never late, and never weak. There is a joy that comes in this surrender, a confidence that rises in your heart when you understand that every obstacle, every opposition, every plot intended to harm you is under the authority of the one who has already conquered all. Even when fear whispers you cannot overcome this, your spirit can say, God is leading me and He has already won. The enemy cannot penetrate the life that is surrendered to divine guidance, because God's presence is a fortress, a shield, and a sword all at once. It protects, it directs, and it destroys the plans of those who wish to see you fail. Your victories are not dependent on human strength, but on the supernatural power of the one who fights for you. Every situation, every challenge, every person who seeks to harm or hinder you finds themselves powerless against a life led by God. The faithfulness of God ensures that even in the moments of testing, even when circumstances seem bleak, His hand moves in ways that bring triumph where defeat seemed certain. You will see enemies fall, obstacles crumble, and your path made straight not because you are strong, not because you are clever, but because you have allowed the one who cannot fail to lead, and when He leads, nothing can stand in your way. The confidence, the assurance, the peace that comes from knowing the enemy has no power over you when God goes before you is unmatched, unstoppable, and unshakable, and it transforms your entire experience of life. There is a liberation, a freedom, a peace beyond understanding that comes when you stop fighting your battles with your own strength and lay them before God. Many of you have carried burdens too heavy to bear, trying to solve problems, mend situations, and confront challenges by your own effort, and yet you have felt exhausted, frustrated, and defeated. The truth is, human strength is limited, and no matter how much determination or courage we summon, we cannot overcome every obstacle on our own. But when we surrender our battles to God, something supernatural begins to happen. The weight lifts from our shoulders. The tension that has consumed our hearts begins to release. The problems that seemed insurmountable start to bend under the power of His presence. Surrender does not mean weakness. It is the ultimate expression of strength, the courage to acknowledge that you cannot do it alone, and the faith to invite the Almighty into every struggle. When you trust God with your battles, you are not abandoning responsibility, but you are aligning with power greater than your own, power that never tires, never fails, and never wavers. Understand that Fitcher Opernuos and a WAIT backs S into SETUP, Crimea EA, for miraculous breakthroughs. When we try to fight alone, we may win small victories, but we often leave behind exhaustion, frustration, and heartbreak. When God fights for us, however, the victories are lasting, complete, and filled with His glory. You begin to see doors open that were once firmly closed, enemies retreat that once seemed insurmountable, and problems dissolve that no human solution could ever fix. Some of you have clutched your situations so tightly that you could not see the hand of God ready to intervene. You have strategized, planned, and pushed forward, yet the results have been disappointing. But the moment you surrender, the entire dynamic changes. What seemed impossible becomes possible. What seemed overwhelming becomes manageable. What seemed relentless becomes defeated. Surrendering your battles is not a one-time act. It is a daily choice, a constant turning of your heart, your mind, and your strength over to the one who holds all power. It is an invitation to trust, to step back, to let go, and to let God. There is also a transformation that happens within you when you surrender. You no longer carry fear, anxiety, or doubt as your companions. Instead, you are filled with courage, peace, and confidence. Your vision becomes clearer, your heart becomes lighter, and your spirit becomes stronger because you are no longer relying on yourself, but on the eternal, unfailing power of God. There is a victory waiting for those who will release control, a breakthrough reserved for those who will stop straining against life and allow God to take the lead. Every battle you hand over, every struggle you surrender, becomes a testimony of His faithfulness, a demonstration of His power, and a celebration of His love. When you stop fighting with your own strength and trust Him to fight for you, the outcome is no longer uncertain, the opposition no longer intimidating, and the enemy no longer victorious. There is a transformation that takes place when faith in God becomes the foundation of your life. It is a power that cannot be measured by human understanding, a light that pierces the darkness of fear, and a peace that settles in your soul even when circumstances seem impossible. Fear is one of the most subtle and persistent enemies you will face. It whispers doubts in your ears, it magnifies challenges, and it paralyzes your steps. Yet faith has the power to silence every whisper of fear. When you place your trust in God, you begin to see with eyes of promise rather than eyes of limitation. You begin to walk boldly where you once hesitated, to speak confidently where you once remained silent, and to act courageously where you once felt paralyzed. Faith is not blind. It is a deliberate choice to believe in the one who has already proven His power, His love, and His faithfulness, even when the evidence around you seems contrary. When fear arises, and it will, you do not have to succumb to it. You do not have to allow it to control your thoughts, your decisions, or your heart. Faith stands firm, it holds strong, and it carries you through trials that once threatened to overwhelm you. There is a peace that accompanies this faith, a calmness that is not dependent on external circumstances, but that flows from an intimate relationship with God. It is a peace that reassures your heart in the night, strengthens your spirit in the day, and guards your mind against anxiety and doubt. Some of you have allowed fear to dictate the course of your life. You have hesitated, worried, and carried burdens that were never meant for your shoulders. Yet the moment faith takes hold, fear begins to dissolve. Every step taken in trust strengthens the confidence in your spirit. Every prayer whispered with faith deepens the peace that settles in your soul. Confidence does not come from your own abilities, from your own plans, or from your own understanding. It comes from knowing that God is with you, that He is fighting for you, and that nothing can overcome His power. When you allow faith to transform your heart, challenges no longer intimidate, obstacles no longer deter, and the enemy no longer terrifies. Your spirit rises above circumstances because you are anchored in the truth that God is bigger than any problem, stronger than any foe, and more faithful than any situation could ever require. Faith changes perception. It turns doubt into trust, anxiety into calm, and uncertainty into assurance. You begin to walk in a new boldness, speak with a new authority, and live with a new joy, because your foundation is no longer in what you can do, but in what God has already done, what He continues to do, and what He promises to do in your life. It is a transformation that impacts not only your heart, but your mind, your body, your relationships, and every area of your life. Faith, when allowed to grow and guide you, produces confidence that is unshakable and peace that is undeniable, giving you the courage to face the future with the certainty that God's power and presence will carry you through every trial, every challenge, and every fear. There is a certainty, a confidence, a deep knowing that comes when you choose to walk hand in hand with God, a certainty that no power on earth or in the spiritual realm can overturn. Victory is not something that you hope for, struggle for, or wish for. It is something that is promised when you align your steps with His. Many have lived their lives running ahead of God, trying to chase success, peace, or triumph through their own strength, only to find disappointment waiting at the end of their effort. But when you place your hand in His, surrendering control and trusting Him to guide, lead, and fight for you, the outcome is no longer uncertain. There is a supernatural assurance that rises in your spirit, a confidence that defies circumstances, a peace that calms every anxious thought. You may face trials, opposition, setbacks, and challenges, yet the knowledge that God is walking with you transforms every battle into a battlefield where victory has already been secured. Some of you have experienced the anxiety of waiting, the tension of wondering if your struggles will ever end, the weariness of fighting without the strength to see it through. But when God is by your side, your steps are protected, your path is illuminated, and your enemies find themselves powerless. Walking hand in hand with God is more than a physical act. It is a spiritual commitment, a daily choice to trust His wisdom over your understanding, His timing over your impatience, and His power over your weakness. When you do this, you begin to notice that the things that once discouraged you now serve to strengthen your faith. The circumstances that once seemed overwhelming now point you to divine strategy. And the opposition that once terrified you now retreats before the authority of His presence. There is an intimacy in walking with God that cannot be replicated in any other way. It is a connection that brings guidance, protection, insight, and provision. It is the kind of companionship that transforms ordinary days into opportunities for miracles, ordinary moments into testimonies of His faithfulness, and ordinary actions into instruments of His glory. Victory is not a fleeting moment. It is a constant reality when you walk with Him. It does not depend on human effort, talent, or achievement, but on the unshakable truth that God is with you. The enemy may attempt to intimidate, circumstances may attempt to confuse, and the world may attempt to discourage, but the hand of God ensures that you cannot fail. Walking hand in hand with God requires trust, patience, obedience, and humility. It requires surrendering your own will, your own ideas, your own strength, and embracing His guidance, His timing, and His power. Yet it is in this surrender that your life begins to experience the fullness of victory that is already promised, the triumph that is already secured, and the joy that is already available. Those who walk with God first do not merely survive. They thrive, they overcome, and they shine as living testimonies of his faithfulness. Every obstacle becomes an opportunity, every enemy becomes a witness to his power, and every challenge becomes a platform for his glory. Victory is no longer something to wish for. It is a certainty, a reality, a promise that is fulfilled in the life of anyone who chooses to walk hand in hand with the one who cannot fail, whose power is unmatched, whose love is unending.